So let's introduce with the first opening question. It strikes me that in the last decades, we have read fiction and all sorts of philosophy, documentary, that project a very gloom perspective on the future. When you read science fiction books, most of them are dystopia. You can think of Silo, of Divergent, of Hunger Games. There are not a lot of science fiction books that give you a positive outcome for the future of mankind. However, here at Google, we believe in progress. We believe in empowerment through technology. We believe in greater good and values. We received an email from our CEO, Sundar Pichai, a few days ago. And he was writing, "At Google, we believe in making people's day a little easier and ultimately helping increase their knowledge, their health, their happiness, and their success." And I want to ask you this first question. Are we at Google the last utopians, the last ones to hope and believe in a better future?
Probably not, but I'm not sure that to be a utopian, to believe in progress, is so good. I'm not certain that it is a privilege, and I'm not completely sure that it is for the best of humanity. I know two ideas which really harm the humanity. One is the idea of a universal, indefinite, unbreakable progress, and the other one is a universal, indefinite, and unbreakable decline. Both philosophies are, for me, as misleading, one and the other. The first one has one big name which might be sufficient to incarnate it, which is the name of the German philosopher Hegel. Hegel believed in a necessary progress. A Hegelian, at least, not Hegel, a Hegelian would believe that whatever you do, even if you do nothing, even if you sit in a lazy way on the back seat, on the last wagon of the train of history, the train will arrive at terminus. On the other side, you have the followers of, let's say, Oswald Spengler, the philosopher who published 1 century ago a very important book and strong book about the decline of the West. He thought exactly the opposite, that whatever you do, even if you do a lot, even if you gesticulate, even if you stand at the forehead of the train and try to push it hard, nevertheless, the world is going to the worst. These two philosophies, for me, are really twins and are twin teachers of laziness. What I like around me, among my friends, the people I respect, are those who believe neither this nor that, but just try to apply what the Jewish thought called the tikkun olam, which is the power which every single individual, every single woman, every single man has to repair a little the world. The world has no sense. The world can go in the worst or in the best direction. We can, each of us, at our level, like Mr. Pichai said, try on his own battlefield, with the means he has in hands, to improve a little the state of affairs, to stop or to slow a little the process of decay. So it's not a question of being utopian. It's not a question of progress. And anyway, utopia, last remark, as it was conceived in the past, is probably unconceivable. We are the first generations, mine and yours, who for the first time in history don't really believe that there is a serious reason for tomorrow being better than today. This idea of a time like an arrow going straight to a target, this idea is really very few fools still believe in that. But the fact that we have in our hands some tools, and that with that tools we can embetter a little or make a little worse the world in which we live, yes, this is in our hands.
All right. Thank you very much for this answer. Thank you very much. So our way to repair the world, and is embedded in our mission statement at Google, is to make the world's information universally accessible and useful. And information is a gateway to a lot of things, and one of those things is knowledge and the empowerment of knowledge. There was a long-standing ideal of thinking every human being could rise to the level of almost universal knowledge and, gentilhomme. And that meaning was very deeply embedded in the European culture of the Enlightenment. I think it's Aufklärung, right, in this original meaning. The more we go in time, the more we find that science is a bottomless pit of very complicated knowledge, that we hear about things that happen at the other side of the world and that don't make sense to us and need a lot of qualification and explaining for us to even grasp or understand, as you've done in the last decades, to tell us about things that happen from our European perspective in places that are very far away. And it seems more and more elusive and distant to us to have knowledge, right? A lot of people, this is surveyed very frequently, would say, I feel the world is going very fast, I think things are very complicated, and I don't feel that I can understand the world or know the world anymore. So my second question is this, is the ideal of the Enlightenment, of bringing knowledge to mankind, of making every man and woman on earth someone who has knowledge and who has understanding of the world around them, is it still relevant, or has it lost its meaning in the recent years and this complexifying of our existence?
It still has meaning, in part because of Google. It is losing its meaning, in part because of Google too. As far as enlightenment is concerned, this is your question, Google is a force for the best and a force for the worst. Let's enter in the core of the question. I speak frankly, if you don't mind. For the best first, Google made two great things. Google launched two real revolutions. Number one, the universal access to knowledge. The dream of the Enlightenment, the dream of the authors of encyclopédies, Diderot and so on, the dream of Hegel, the absolute knowledge, le savoir absolu. This seemed out of reach for humanity till the last decades. For the first time, and this is even incredible and nearly unthinkable that in such a short time a few people achieve that, this knowledge is accessible. And this is really an anthropological change in the destiny of humanity. The fact that any scientific discovery, any medical research in a remote laboratory of any continent can be at your reach or mine in a click, this is completely new and completely revolutionary, and it is a gesture of enlightenment. Diderot, d'Alembert would have liked this aspect of Google. There is another thing that Google did and achieved, which goes also in the sense of this enlightenment. It is the fact that every single citizen of the world has, for the first time in the history of humanity, the technical possibility and the human right not only to express himself, but to have his expression written, embedded, inscribed somewhere. One of my masters, Michel Foucault, French philosopher who spent a lot of time at the end of his life in San Francisco, by the way, made a huge difference between two sorts of people. More important than the have and the have-not. More important than those who had power and those who were dominated. It was the difference, said Michel Foucault, with the famous and the infamous. What he called the infamous, which meant, in his language, those who had no way to have their fama, their reputation, the story of their crossing of the planet, leaving any trace anywhere. Michel Foucault said, one of the worst of inequality is that. 99% of humanity crosses the planet, crosses life, without leaving any scar, any trace at the surface of the planet. And this, said Michel Foucault, or a Michel Foucault follower could conclude, this is heartbreaking. This is an absolute unfairness. To this, Google brought a reparation. Google repaired that. Since Google and since the digital revolution in general, any one of us can step out if he wants from out of the night of the obscure men and women. Step out the night of the infamous. These two gestures are true gestures of enlightenment, and again, Denis Diderot, d'Alembert, d'Holbach, all the French pre-revolutionaries who made this real revolution of making encyclopedia, which was not Wikipedia, believe me, they would consider that as two enlightened gestures. Then, the worst. Real enlightenment supposes two additional propositions, two additional things. Number one, that this absolute knowledge, which is, as I said, under the reach of anyone, has to be mastered. You have to have a way to find your way in its bushes. You have to find a way for this putting into access of your universal knowledge to be a real gesture of enlightenment. You have not only to have it like this at your disposal, but you have to be able to mobilize it, to shape it, to mold it, to make your own way through it, to eat it, to devour it. The Hebrew prophets said they were great eaters of words. They did not only utter the words of prophecy, they really masticated them. And the new technology, the new tools of the digital revolution at this moment do not give the boussole, how do you say in boussole? Compass. Don't give the compass. Don't give the cape. They are like this system of the world, which was well described by a German philosopher before Hegel, who was called Leibniz. Leibniz described a world of infinite complexity, which he called the world of monadology, which was an absolute labyrinth of deeds and words where any of us was and had to be like an Orpheus in the labyrinth. Number one, Google and any company produced by, born from this digital revolution did not know to this moment how to provide the compass, the cape, and the tool. And number two, this process, this right given to the have-not of fame, the right to have a fame, is an act of enlightenment if you are still able to make a difference between the words, between the expressions, between the propositions, for example, of an expert whose expertise is nearly impossible to understand because he spent all his life with algorithms and so on, and somebody who just expressed his mood of the day. The opinion of a moody guy cannot, from an enlightened point of view, okay, cannot have the same weight and the same value as the opinion of a scholar, an academic, a woman or a man who devoted his life and who put all the interest of his libido sciendi in the production of this opinion. And this passage, this way of going from proposal number one, I have the right to express myself and you have the duty to respect me, to proposal number two, I have the right to say that my truth is a truth and you have no right to make any hierarchy, to make any difference between a better truth or a lower truth. This way of going from one to the other, this passage, is a non-enlightened one. By allowing that, the digital revolution, for the moment, overshadows or spreads, cast a part of shadow and of night on the light that you, Google, and others produced.
All right, so thank you very much for this. And also, eating the words, I think, will please a lot of Googlers because we have a lot of love for food at Google. And so we should put this on the menu, I think, more words, right? So this brings us to another consideration and another segue from information, which is truth or lies. This topic, which seems very simple, and you could take a 5-year-old child and say, this is a lie or this is the truth, suddenly becomes much more complicated when you apply it to a grown-up or grown-ups. And a little story here, my grandmother, when I was a child, used to say, oh, you know, truth is like a mirror fallen from the sky. It has exploded in a million pieces. Everyone grabs a piece, look at themselves and say, I hold the truth. And I would like to ask you this. Do you think that there is still such a thing as truth? And how should we handle that notion of truth versus lie? Or have we gone and veered into an environment of opinions? And if yes, how can we find our way out of the opinions and get back to the guidance, to the meal of words, to the meal of meaning?
I don't know if there is a truth or not. Or if I have my idea on that, this is not the first thing I would like to share with you. The first thing I want to share is that if we don't believe that there is a truth, if we believe that there is as many truths as there are individuals, then the world will become a hell. Then the world will become the stage of an unfinishable battlefield between every truth. This is a real problem. If really the truth is this broken mirror, if really each human being has the legitimate feeling that he owns part of the true cross or mirror of the truth, then it will be war forever. So the real question, you have two opposite problems. Number one is the one I just mentioned, to believe that there is as many truths as human beings. This is the position of the sophists, the Greeks, 5th century before Christ, had a school of thinkers who exactly thought that. They exactly thought, they said, that l'homme est la mesure de toute chose. Every single man is the measure of the value of things. He has an opinion on the truth, and his opinion is absolutely respectable. This was a sophistic position, and we know by history, we know by their contemporaries that, number one, they were the allied of the tyrants, of the despots, and especially of those who condemned to death Socrates, which was a huge event in the history of humanity. The death of Socrates is something on which humanity reflected for centuries. It was a trauma on which affected humanity for centuries. You have this temptation. And you had at this time another temptation, which was to say, there is one truth. It is somewhere. And a few of us have the divine power to know where and to know how. This gives, obviously, to those who are in touch with the truth an incredible power, and who would refuse to someone the absolute power if he could say and prove, come on, I have the Graal. I know where it is, I know the ladder, and so on. And this is again a justification of tyranny. So you can justify tyranny, which is for sure the biggest, for an enlightened citizen, the biggest evil. You can justify tyranny by the two ways. By saying that there is as many truths as there is individuals, and by saying that there is only one truth hidden somewhere but reachable. These are the two opposite risks. In the middle, you have a more humble way, which seems to me at the same time the most reasonable, the one that has the advantage to produce less disease and to be probably the most close to the reality, which is that there is a truth, number one, that it is out of reach, number two, but that it should be targeted, pursued with goodwill by each of us. And knowing that none of us will ever say, I got it. We are like in the Greek paradox of Zénon d'Élée and the Tortuga. Will never reach. It will never bypass. The seeker of the truth will never fill the space. He will always fill half of it and so on. So my reply to your question would be that. No to the broad. I'm sorry for your grandmother.
I think it was a cautionary tale, so I think you're in the spirit.
So no for the mirror. No for the Platonician idea. But yes to these women and men lost in the night and seeing from time to time a shining star hiding itself but showing nevertheless the path. This is a way I believe in.
All right, thank you very much for this. So, interestingly, we're leading to the next part of our discussion about solutions, about how we can contribute. What I heard from you today was that to the meal of knowledge, of words, we have to be guided, that there is a search for the truth, and that the search matters more than the truth itself, in a way, and the goodwill we put into this. I deeply believe that at Google, everyone has a lot of goodwill. We are very much a goodwill company, and we even hire one another with goodwill as one of our main criteria, right? We call this googliness, and it's a form of extension of goodwill. And we all want to do the right thing and look for the right thing. So I want to ask you next about solutions. There is a quote that you make, and you actually made it several times over the last 20 years. So it's a quote from Virgil that you say Freud had at the introduction of the analysis of dreams, saying, if I can't move the gods, at least I can move the river of the shadows. And I think this is, Juno used to say this in Virgil's plays. And here we are, right, reaching to the gods, to people who have a credible power, knowledge, perspective, and yet having to move the river of shadows, which is the whole of mankind moving as a whole, and almost a subconscious thought for us because it's billions of people empowered. How can we arbitrate? What do you think, what do you propose to us as solutions, guidelines to repair the world in the way that we can repair the world? And how would you dream Google to tackle these tough challenges that we have discovered together and that lead from information about truth, about knowledge, about empowerment?
What I think is that you have definitely a huge and even frightening responsibility. You, digital companies in general, but especially Google, which is incomparable to the others. You have a huge responsibility. No company in the history of mankind ever had such a power, ever had such an influence in the way in which your fellow human beings, your brothers in humanity, think. You have a huge influence on that. There is a point I did not mention is, for example, the relationship we all have to our own memory. This is a point I make in my book. I call that, after one of my masters, the Syndrome of Sandoni. The Syndrome of Sandoni was this French bishop of the 3rd century after Christ, who was beheaded by a group of pagans and who is reported by a miracle to have climbed the hill, which is named today as the Colline of Saint-Denis, with his beheaded head under his elbow. He continued to climb the hill. Why do I mention that? Because today, because of the digital revolution, and with the help of Google, we all are some sort of Saint-Denis, having not our brain, but our memory, not under our elbow, but in our pocket. We all know the experience of having a coffee with friends at the cafeteria, or the Chinese soup, delicious, which I just had, trying to recall an event, a date, a quote, whatever, and checking, Googling it. It became a verb. So there is a sort of, in very short time, we are facing a real concerning process of exfiltration in a great machine that goes so fast, who puts things in such an order of a big part of our memory. There is an exfiltration, an exteriorization, and offshoreization beyond the shores of our head of a big part of our memory. On some regards, why not? This machine is maybe more intelligent and makes less slip of the tongue and so on. But at the same time, slips of the tongue, misunderstandings, false memories are so crucial for the soul, the imagination, and the process of thinking. So you have a huge responsibility. In 20 years, you produced, you injected in your own minds and in ours and in the minds of 3/4 of maybe 4/5 of humanity, real changes. Number two, I know that about the goodwill. I know that. I know it through my friends who are working for big digital companies. And I know it from Google because I happen to have discussions. I don't know if I can say that here, but with Mr. Sundar Pichai last summer, your president, and more closely with the European team of Google. You have some, in Paris and in Europe, a team of ladies and gentlemen. Some of them have become friends. Mr. Carlo Dazario Blondo, I don't know if it rings, if you know him. And I know that these ladies, these gentlemen, maybe because they have the head in the new world and the feet in the old one, maybe because part of them is still belonging to the Italian Renaissance world, maybe for what, or just because they are just good people. I know, and I seldom saw that. I seldom in my life saw such big companies having such a terrifying, huge power and having so much goodwill, so much will to repair. The Jewish commandment of repairing the world, tikkun olam, is true that in all big digital companies, and especially in this one, I find it as a real motto, as a real reason to work and to live and to win. I know that there is a leadership in this company that prefers to leave a good scar, to repeat the metaphor I made before, a good scar, a scar of life and of light and of hope in the future of humanity than a bad inheritance. Number two, and I'm convinced of that. Number three, after that, you have to know what to do. When you made a golem like in Prague, Maharal of Prague, this sort of great, admirable, and somehow crazy machine that is able to produce some effects which you programmed but that you do not control. You put them in the machine. You don't control completely all the outcomes. How can you act? What can you do? I had in Paris a meeting of this sort with your colleagues of European Google. And a few ideas stemmed out of the conversation. For example, I launched the idea of, as I told before, access of knowledge, great. But if you are able to walk into it, and if you are able to memorize it. So I launched the idea of an encyclopedia. When I said at the beginning of our conversation, each time I quoted Diderot, I quoted the encyclopedia. Why not to do? If I were Google, I would certainly devote one of the billions or half of a billion, or one tenth of the billions I earn, my company earns every year, in order to produce the encyclopedia of the modern times, of the 21st century. It is doable. Even if the knowledge is complex, even if it is, as you said, it is possible to assemble it. There are few hundreds, maybe a few thousands of high-ranking scientists who devoted their life in their discoveries. They could make accessible to all the Google researchers their knowledge, as the scientists of the time of Diderot did. So I have a dream. This is what I said to your Paris colleagues, Dazaro Blondeau and his colleagues. I have the dream of, because we have an encyclopedia today. It is called Wikipedia. Okay, I am well placed, each of us is well placed to know that it is the worst possible encyclopedia. It is not good, really. It is not good. It is full of vested interest. Each article of Wikipedia is a battlefield in which some forces fight, as in a fight of sophists in the ancient Greece. You had on the agora of Athens Gorgias, Protagoras, Callicles, who were just fighting for their truth. And the strongest one, this is Wikipedia. It is not dictated by the ideal of the inaccessible star in the darkness or in the fog. An encyclopedia that would be directed by that, I'm sure that it would be a real progress for humanity, a good way to allow each of us to make his way, like in the Inferno of Dante, but an Inferno of Dante who would have a few lights suddenly coming in. I would do that. You know as much as well as anyone that we are living in a world where truth is under attack. It is not the fault of Google. It is the fault of Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. It is the fault of the philosophers of the 20th century. It is the fault of the post-Nietzschean descendants. There is a lot of responsibility. But you know how a tool like yours can speed the false truth and can block them. You know that company like a tool, don't speak about company, a tool like the tools of Google, like the algorithms of Google, can have an incredible contribution to the process in both ways. This deserves also to be thought, to be reflected, and there is certainly some means. In Paris, I proposed the idea of making in real time a sort of hall of shame of the fake news. I launched the idea of making every year a competition all over the world with an award, with a prize, with money given to the YouTuber or to the user of Google who would propose the best short video or short tale or whatever, able to turn into laughing, into ridicule the fake news. I don't know how it can be proceeded. And you objected me in a conversation that the way in which the new world works makes that a shame can be a source of desire. And the more you put shame on a fake news, the most maybe it will, maybe I'm wrong. But there must be a way, when you are Google, when you are such a big company, to put all your knowledge, all your technicity, all your algorithms at the service of the truth. I'm sure of that. And the memory, again, I'm sure that this process of exfiltration, of Sandonization of our memory is reversible. There are, today we have every day some young genius who invent a startup with an application producing crazy things for this, to sleep better, to count your steps, whatever. I'm sure that there is ways to restart and to make our memory work again. I would reflect on this sort of path if I were you.
All right, thank you very much. So, thank you very much. So I could go on and ask you questions for the whole day, but we don't have the whole day, and I'm not alone here. And this is the perfect time to give the mic to the audience. Does anyone want? So maybe we have one here in front, and then one there on the side. Follow up.
You spoke at great length, and I truly agree with a lot of the things that you said. But you haven't touched a lot on the book that you wrote, and which the talk is about. And so I hope with my question to give you an opportunity to expand a little bit on the five kings and what is the metaphor behind that. And you know, like in the list of these places that you mention, you do mention the United States as being in decline. You do not mention the European Union or the United Kingdom or the Commonwealth. So what is the main idea and thrust that we should get from the book that is being presented here?
I did not do it because I did not come to speak about me, but to speak about you, honestly. No. For me, it's a real treat to be here. And I really wanted to give. So in a few words, this book is about the bill of $1 which you may have in your pocket. If somebody here has a bill of $1 in his pocket, $1, she or he will find that on this bill of $1, there are 3 quotes. These three quotes are here. The first one is in Latin, annuit coeptis. The second one is in Latin also, novus ordo seclorum. And the third one is in Latin also, e pluribus unum, on the wings of the eagle. So 3 Latin quotes in a bill of the most materialistic country in the world. These three Latin quotes are all driven from the same author. This author is called Virgil. And Virgil is the author of a book called Aeneid, that tells a story which is, for me, the founding story of the birth, of the growth, of the success of America. This is what my book is about. Why there is 3 Virgil quotes in a bill of $1. And the book is also about the fact that when you forget the 3 Latin quotes on a bill of $1, when you forget, which is happening today, the Virgilian root of the United States of America, in other words, when you forget that you are a country based on the rock of certain values and principles, when you forget that you, your ancestors, your grandfathers, invented this country in order to reset Europe, because this is America. There is 3 quotes of Virgil on this bill, because the idea was to reset Europe exactly as Aeneas did reset Troy. The city of Troy in flames, the city of Amsterdam, Paris, and London in flames in the 16th century, and in face of these flames is the idea of reinventing a shining city on a new land. If you forget that, then 5 kings appear. 5 kings that are former empires that collapsed one after the other, who thought since decades and centuries that they collapse forever, and who are beginning to think that if America withdraws, if America recedes, if America abdicates, then there might be an opportunity for them to advance, to occupy the field, and to fill the vacuum. This is what this book is about. But it is also about Google. It is also about the fact that the superpower that a few digital companies have has something to do with this movement of a tide going back in terms of geopolitics. I give you back your dollar.
Thank you. So we had another question there, please.
Thank you. Thanks for coming. You said something interesting about Wikipedia being one of the worst things we could have as an encyclopedia, and also that one of the reasons, if I understand correctly, that it's one of the worst things is because Wikipedia is a battlefield for vested interests. I'm curious how you think about so the big difference between Wikipedia and Google is Google gets most of its revenue from ads, and Wikipedia has pledged over the time that it will never accept ad dollars. How do you think about how this would impact vested interest and would impact the truth that both systems can produce?
The worst vested interests are those who are hidden, who are not fully and officially expressed. An ad, the vested interest is here. It is like a board. A vested interest disguised in search for truth, this is the worst. This is my reply. I have nothing against ad. The New York Times, Le Monde, the best newspapers on earth, and others have ads It is clear. It's open. It does not mean that they are a battlefield for champions of so-called pieces of truth. Problem of Wikipedia is that under the appearance of neutrality, under the appearance of everyone, of participation, under the idea that you have an invisible hand, like in the market, that will be as a referee correcting in real time all the excess and will reach the truth. Under this idea, there are some real intellectual interests. I'm not speaking about intellectual interests of people who want to impose or to make advance or to give a chance to something which is a lie. I remember Philip Roth, the great American writer. He saw a mistake on his Wikipedia page. He protested. He wrote in an innocent way, old world. He wrote a letter to Wikipedia saying, I'm sorry, but the reply was, you are not une source fiable.
Yeah. A reliable source.
A reliable source for Philip Roth. So this is Wikipedia. You cannot make an encyclopedia if you don't believe that there is a ladder, that there is a scale, that there is a hierarchy in terms of knowledge. Nobody has the full knowledge, okay. Nobody is able to say, I have the final knowledge, okay. We all know that the history of science overshadows every provisional truth at a point. Every truth is a provisional one and will be bypassed by another one. But you cannot say that a provisional truth has the same status as a crazy idea just stemming out of a vested interest desire. You cannot say that. And the problem today of most of the, especially of Wikipedia we have, is that it works under this false idea. And we have to restore, even if it sounds elite. I know that you are a democratic company. I know that.
No, we're not.
You praise democracy. You praise democracy.
Externally, yes, but internally we're not a democratic
Okay,
company.
I don't want to enter in that. But you praise the idea of every point of view having to be respected, having to be praised, and so on. This, why not? But to be respected does not mean everyone should be respected in expressing his caprice, his belief, his will to think, his hope that the truth should be this or that, but not in the idea that he has the truth when he did not make the process, when he did not make the path and the road that the scientists know, and which is the road for the truth. The two cannot be put on the same level. And there is something to restore there, which is not a reactionary gesture, but which is, yes, a gesture of restoration. And it would be great that the most democratic company, one of the most, maybe another than Google, I don't know, makes this restoration and dares to say that between Einstein and any crazy member of a conspiracy sect, you have an abyss. This has to be reminded.
All right, well, thank you very much. We are on time, so time to thank you again for coming and joining us. As we say in English, food for thoughts. So, we have a lot of words to chew now and to ruminate for the coming weeks or months. We hope to have you again at some point, because this is an ongoing conversation, of course. and wish you the best of stay here on the West Coast and for your next travels in America and all over the world. Thank you very much, and pleasure having you. Thank you.